of Padua, though currently she is on leave from Padua and working as a distinguished research scientist at the IBM Watson Research Center. In the past, and until now, she has, sorry, I was just half looking at the chat. She has worked extensively in symbolic AI. She started out working mainly on constraint satisfaction and optimization, in particular on some kind of structured constraint networks with concurrency and graph grammars and rewriting, and then also worked extensively on preference modeling and reasoning, and her application of these for multi-agent systems. And these brought her to some topics like voting and bribery, as well as safety constraints and ethical principles in collective decision-making, and other thorny ethical issues like building ethically bounded AI or composable bias rating of AI services. And recently, she has also adopted Kahneman's concept of thinking fast and slow to AI systems, in particular as a way to get these systems to satisfy both an agent's preferences and their ethical priorities. At the same time, she has been a very, very active member in the AI community. For example, she has been president of ICHCAI, an editor-in-chief of JAIR, and she is both a triple AI and a RURI fellow. So I am very much looking forward to Francesca's keynote on ethics for the semantic web. And Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Oli. So for the introduction, just let me clarify that I'm not a university professor anymore since 2018.
Francesca, we can't hear you.
No, we can.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just to clarify that I'm not a university professor anymore. I'm full-time at IBM, been there for 7 years, and I am the company AI ethics global leader, and also currently the AAAI president in terms of my research commitments. So let me share my screen to start my presentation. So today I'm going to talk about AI ethics. As Uli said, my background is in AI, and I have a PhD in computer science, and I worked in AI since my master thesis many years ago. And then gradually I became more interested into the ethics issues with this technology and this deployment, very pervasive deployment to our society. So today I'm going to talk about what's the state of play in AI ethics, the evolution of this field over the recent years, and what we can learn for what has been done that can be useful also to tackle maybe specific ethics issues that may be relevant for the semantic web. So, as you know, AI is really very pervasive in our life. It supports many of the activities that we do online and that have to do with some digital presence. So you find it like in digital assistance at home or in driving support, customer care, online recommendations, media, news, healthcare, financial services, and so many areas. But besides being very, very pervasive, it's also used in very high-stake decision-making applications, such as the credit and financial domain, employment domain, HR, admission to schools, healthcare, and internally into enterprise workflow. So this application of AI in decisions that can have really an important impact on people's life and well-being, also it's one of the reasons why some legitimate questions about the impact of this technology are raised. A company can use AI for many different things. It can use it for improving all the business function and processes, to improve the relationship and the engagement with the client, to help the growth of the company, to make better business decisions, to manage risk in a better way. This is true in most areas of operation of the company, whether it's internal audit or external, the data governance, again, fraud prevention, and so on. So really, not only as an individual, we use AI in everything we do, but internally in a company, AI can be used also in a very pervasive way. So this is true especially now because the pandemic, these terrible years of the pandemic, have accelerated the digitalization of companies and of individuals. So companies that have not followed this trend for an accelerated digitalization have not done as well. So definitely this environment of the pandemic has led to a much more technology-based and digitally-based life for everybody and operations within a company. So this pervasiveness and this use of AI in a high-stake decision environment has led to reasonable and legitimate questions about the impact of this technology. So the AI ethics field of study is a very multidisciplinary field that includes AI experts, but also philosophers, sociologists, economists, policymakers, and so on, and many other and civil society organizations that has a very simple goal to be stated. So to take the best out of this technology and then to avoid or mitigate the negative impact. But this goal, which is so simple to state, is also not very easy to be achieved because it requires a lot of different complementary things, both technical solutions that can help those who build AI systems to build AI in a way that is aware of our values, that follows our values, whether it's fairness, equity, and others, but also many socio-technical solutions, such as principles, guidelines, best practices, standards, regulations, audit frameworks, certifications, and so on. So there are all these complementary ways that the AI ethics field has been studied and developing so far. So let's start to understand some of these AI ethics issues. So first of all, AI, and especially machine learning techniques, need a lot of data to function well. And they also sometimes need a lot of personal data. So issues about data privacy and governance, who collects the data, with whom this data is shared, how long my data has been kept somewhere and stored. So data privacy and governance are really very central issues. The second, fairness, has to do with values. So as I said, the idea is that we would like these machines to be aware of our values and functions according to them. One of the most important human values for human beings is fairness, the ability, the capability of recognizing and not making discriminations among different groups of people. So if we want AI to be involved in making decisions or in recommending decisions to human beings, we have to make sure that it works according to a fairness criteria, which is not just one definition, just to say there are more than 20 definitions of fairness that may be appropriate for or not for specific decision environment. So the next one is inclusion. So even if the AI system has been built with a certain notion of fairness embedded in it, the way it is deployed and used may increase the social gaps, so may not be inclusive. So this is very important also, that not only we have to build it with fairness, but we have also to use it in an inclusive way. Explainability is a property of an AI system, and it says that the AI system is capable of providing an explanation of how it got to the output, whether it's a recommendation, a decision, a prediction, a classification, from the input data. And the issue here is that some of the techniques that are currently used, especially those based on deep learning and the huge number of parameters, are not really very explainable. So they are very opaque, like a black box, and this is very detrimental in terms of being able to use these machines together with human beings to support the decision-making capabilities of human beings, because these humans would not trust a black box in recommending decisions to them. The next one is about transparency. So while explainability is a property of the AI system that should be able to explain how it gets to the output from the input, transparency instead is something that should be put in place by the developers of the AI system that should provide information about how that AI system has been built, which distribution of the training data, which bias tests are being used and with what results and so on. And this to allow a more informed and appropriate use of that AI system. The next one is about accountability. This AI system is mostly based on statistics, and so they always have a percentage of error. And so when that error and maybe adverse impact on human beings happens, who is accountable? That's a very important question to be answered. Social impact is also very important because AI has been rapidly becoming so pervasive, as I mentioned earlier. So it generates a very fast transformation of how we live, how we work, how we interact with each other. So that's really a very important topic to discuss, whether to understand the really larger impact of AI, not just in each single task that we embed AI in, and to understand whether that impact is an evolution that we want of our society. There are also issues of human and moral agency. AI can be used to profile people that release their data to get a more personalized service, and also this profilation can also be used to manipulate people's preferences. And so questions about how much we continue being in control, we have our own agency for our decision. AI can be used for many different things, and we said, but when we talk about AI for social good, that you may have heard this term, we mean AI that develops solutions that are specifically intended to move forward towards the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And there has been studies that show that, yes, AI can be used to move forward, but these goals are very intersecting with each other. So these intersectionality issues sometimes make AI move, in a positive way towards one goal, but maybe at the detriment of another goal. So it has to be very careful. And here there are a lot of initiatives that try to put together those that have the AI knowledge with those that belong to, for example, from in the UN agencies, and know the problems that are related to achieving these sustainable development goals. Many recent AI systems are based on techniques that need a lot of training data and a lot of computing power in order to be trained, and therefore a lot of energy, especially, for example, what people call foundation model or large language models. And so these systems that are so huge, they require so much energy for training and deployment, that start raising some environmental impact issues. Because of the huge amount of data and energy and computing power that is needed, and that not everybody has the access to, there are also issues of power imbalance, because not everybody can use that amount of data and computing power. Now, all these issues have mostly been considered in a centralized environment, in an environment where decisions are made in a centralized way, rules are applied in a centralized way, and this is not what happens in an environment like the semantic web, where the notion of truth is not centralized, is not defined in a centralized way. So it's very important to understand what it means to trust a page or a site where some information is provided. As well as issues of data privacy, even more than in a centralized environment. So how to avoid that data is passed from where it should not go, and privacy leakages happen. The semantic web also allows, I mean, as a goal of embedding the web with metadata that can be readable from machines. And this raises questions about human engagement and oversight in interpreting the data, in giving meanings, rather than just relying on machine readable metadata. Of course, the main central difference here is the fact that this is a very decentralized environment. So there is no central regulatory entity that says or implements techniques to regulate crime or the presence of harmful content, or youthful abuse, or any other behavior that should be avoided. So how to So one important question is how to implement some principles that have been defined and regulated in a centralized environment, how to do that in a decentralized environment. Another issue that's happening in a decentralized environment related to ethics is that each component of this decentralized environment may have the right properties to be called trustworthy or ethical or responsible and so on. But then when you put the components together, there is no compositionality in ethics. So it could be that by putting ethical, let's say, components together, you get a whole which is not does not have the properties that you would like. So how you tackle decentralized environment, how you regulate and the decentralized environment, and how you deal with ethics, non-compositionality in that environment, and how you define the notion of truth. So these are all questions that, in my view, have not been treated very, very deeply in AI ethics, because it has been mostly about centralized environment, but definitely these frameworks for AI ethics should be rapidly expanded to allow to treat and to handle in the best way also this kind of decentralized environment. So let me tell you a little bit what I saw around AI ethics. So I saw that there were in very few years, there were three main phases. The first one is a phase of awareness. That was where people just trying to identify issues. And in some sense, it's a phase that in a staggered way happens right now in this kind of decentralized environment, like the semantic web, blockchain, and so on. So the phase of awareness about centralized environment happened already several years ago, and now it's happening, in other environments. But then after awareness, there was a phase of principles. Everybody, corporation, government, academia, civil society, many other, they wrote down principles. They published sets of principles to make commitments about AI and the ethics issues around AI. And now we are in the phase of practice. Now we are implementing, and when I say we, I mean again, all the actors that publish those principles, and and when I say practice or implementation of these principles, I mean with many different ways, depending on the actor. It can be internal corporate directives and processes, it can be auditing, it can be certification, regulations, standards, and so on. So this is what I saw in the evolution of AI ethics in centralized environment. Now, what I expect to see for decentralized environment is a slightly, moved, the same three phases to happen, hopefully in a much faster way because of the lessons learned here and the tools put together and the mechanisms put together in this environment, and starting, doing the awareness principle and practice also now. From now. So this is an idea of how many actors published sets of principles around AI ethics in centralized environments. So you see that this is a very nice description of these principles. This was put together in 2019 by a Harvard project called the Principled AI Project that summarizes all the actors that published since, until 2019, so there may be many others at this point. And each ray of this circle here is one set of principles published by one actor. So you see how many they are. There are more than 100 altogether. They all have the same themes, similar themes, but they look at these themes from different priorities and different angles. So I put this picture because I think that for centralized environment, we have enough sets of principles. And now that's why now we are in the phase of practice. So when we look at the AI ethics in practice, there are many actors that need to play their part with different mechanisms. The first one definitely is AI research. This is research that happens within AI, but more and more happens in a very multidisciplinary way, where AI experts, people that have AI knowledge, get together with other experts of other disciplines to address issues such as fairness, explainability, interpretability, robustness, privacy, value alignment, all properties that we want to give to AI systems. And with the technical knowledge of the AI experts, but also the knowledge of the societal impact of the technology that is given by sociologists, psychologists, philosophers, and so on. So now almost every AI conference lists these topics in the main list of topics of the conference. And there are also specialized AI-related conferences like AI Ethics and Society is one of them, or FACT is another one, that really focus on this topic and focus on the fact that they are worked on by a very multidisciplinary community. The second actor that I mentioned here are the companies, corporate environments. And when I say AI companies, actually I say both companies that build AI, but also those that use AI. And when you put together these two, they're more or less every company. And companies need to play their role in putting together the internal mechanisms to be able to build and use AI in the most appropriate and beneficial way. So they need to put, yes, technical solutions, but also governance, internal processes, risk assessment, processes, training, and education. And I will tell you a little bit more about what companies are doing, and especially IBM. Another actor are the standard bodies. International standards are very useful has been very useful in many occasions in driving the technology towards some best practices, because a standard, after all, is just a formalized best practice that once started to be used, it will possibly be used by many and possibly by all, in some cases of some standards. And so it creates a best practice in a very voluntary way. And the standard bodies, there are many of them, like ISO or NIST in the States, or IEEE. And here I just mentioned one example of a series of standards put together by IEEE that have all have to do with standardizing one particular aspect of dealing with one aspect of AI ethics, whether it's bias and fairness or transparency or data privacy and so on. The educational institution also have a very important role to play, meaning that until now, most educational institutions have educated the next generation of researchers or workers in a very siloed way. You know, either you were trained on AI or on sociology or philosophy, economy, and so on. But here, instead, we find a lot of courses that try to break these silos and to bring both technology and ethics into the same course and into the education of the students, whether they are students in the technical field or in the social sciences. And here I just put a list of 16 courses that were a list that was published recently on a magazine, but there are hundreds of courses at this point in various educational institutions that try to help students to be formed in a way that is really very multidisciplinary and can help them, in whether they go into a technical field or a social field, they help them, being able to have knowledge from both of them. Then another important actor is the policymakers. And here I just mentioned one example of a regulation that is under discussion at this point in Europe that tries to regulate AI based on two fundamental principles. One is to regulate not the technology, but the applications of the technology. And the second one is to put more obligations where the application shows to be is labeled as more risky. So again, these two are two fundamental concepts in this regulation, and a risk-based approach is also used in some other regulation. But it's true that this regulation approach is really intended to function well in a centralized environment. So in a decentralized environment like the semantic web, new ways that standards could be one, but other ways of defining best practices and making sure that everybody is working according to this best practice must be found, besides really regulations or laws, legal systems that may be different in different parts of the world. Of course, these 5 actors are, in my view, very important, but they don't need to work in isolation, each one of them. They need to work together, and they need to also work together with other important actors, like the civil society organization, the media, the activists, and the society at large. So from the research point of view, as I said, the researchers, AI researchers are very important in this AI ethics journey because they publish a lot of papers and they do a lot of innovations in terms of giving AI, the systems, the right properties in order to function well in an ethics way. Here I just give you some projects that I led over the various years, and that were all AI projects, but they were related to some ethics idea around the ethical deployment and build construction, of AI systems. So you'll see here projects about embedding ethical principles into decision-making systems based on reinforcement learning or based on other techniques, or a project about engineering morality by understanding how humans switch between for example, deontology and consequentialism approaches to making moral decisions, and then embedding this way of switching into a machine. There are projects about embedding ethical properties in collective decision systems where several agents may be involved in making a single decisions, and how you embed these properties and how you achieve trade-offs between several properties. And in particular, in that project, we looked at privacy, social welfare, and fairness. And the last, as Uli mentioned, how to get inspired by cognitive theories of human decision-making, like the thinking fast and slow theory, to build systems that can be more aware of how humans make decisions in order to do either of two things: make decisions similar to how human being would make it, but also, and more importantly, use the knowledge of how humans make decisions using these two modalities, the thinking fast or thinking slow, to help human beings make better decisions, given that humans and machines are still very complementary, for example, in the handling of huge amounts of data that may overwhelm people, but can be handled by machines. So supporting human decision-making. Here, I want to give you an idea of what how companies are thinking about AI ethics. So there are many drivers inside the company in the various business units for what the company is doing, and the same is for AI ethics. So there are some companies that think that they just need to wait for the regulation to come, and then they will comply to that regulation. And this is one approach that some companies have, but it's not very successful in terms of achieving the best, doing the best for society with this technology, or even having a return on the use of this technology for the company as well. So there are many, that's why I say there are many AI ethics drivers. Yes, regulation is one of them, of course, because companies need to comply with regulation, and regulation can dictate some way of building or using AI, which is in some sense an implementation of the ethics consideration of the technology. But there are also many other drivers. Of course, issues about social justice and equity, company values, the company reputation and trust of society towards that company, or of clients towards that company. Client request. More and more clients are asking, what are you doing about AI fairness in this solution that you are giving to me? Is this solution explainable? So more and more clients are asking for to their sellers of AI solutions some proof that these issues of AI ethics are handled in the best way. Media coverage is also very important because more and more media is scrutinizing what AI developers are doing and what companies deploying AI are doing with AI. And so it's very important for a company to have a good media coverage and not a negative one. But there are also some positives. So companies should devote time and energy to AI ethics, not just because to avoid something bad happening to the company, but also because of the opportunity to doing something good, not for social equity and justice, but also because this can create a differentiator for the company compared to other ones that do not treat well these issues, and also business opportunities, because the company can put together solutions that can, for AI ethics, that can then be used by other companies and can be put together as offerings to other companies that can help these other companies accelerate the path in dealing well with AI ethics in their own environment, with their own operations. So we did recently a study around what AI ethics, to ask companies what they are doing right now related to AI ethics. You can find this study on the web. It's called AI Ethics in Action. And there are many data that we collected out of more than 1,000 companies all over the world. And so I want to give you some results from these data, some observations. So the first one is that there is still a large intention-action gap, meaning that companies are endorsing the principles for AI ethics, whether it's about transparency, diversity, privacy, and so on. More than 50% of the company are endorsing these principles, and this is the blue line, but much less, about 20% only, and this is the green line, are implementing these principles. So there is still a large gap between endorsing and implementing the various principles of AI ethics. Companies are doing the first step in this implementation of the principles by incorporating knowledge about AI ethics and the commitments around AI ethics into the existing business ethics mechanisms, more than half of the companies. But most importantly, companies are understanding that these AI ethics issues, the responsibility inside the company of the AI ethics issues is not just in the technical side of the company, like this chief technology officer, but is shifting from technical leaders to non-technical leaders, the CEO, the board, and so on. So over 3 years, and we compared that because we did another study in 2018 when we asked the companies the same question: who is responsible in your company for dealing with these AI ethics issues? And in 2018, most companies gave a response that had to do with technical leaders, while now in 2021, and the study was published in 2022, companies understood, most companies, that the responsibility goes up to the board and the CEO. And this is very important because AI ethics cannot be addressed in a company with a team of technical people that use additional tech to solve a technical problem, but it has to be a company-wide approach to address socio-technical issues with not just technical, but socio-technical solutions. Diversity in the team is one very good way to start addressing the issues of bias that are embedded into AI system by the developers' teams. And so making the teams more diverse is always a very good starting point. But unfortunately, the bad news is that still these teams are not very diverse in general in enterprises. This is the blue that you see here, but even more in AI teams. This is the green part. So we still have a lot of work to do in diversity and inclusion in the teams. What is promising is that the companies that we have interviewed said that 54% of them said that they plan in the next 3 years to give more importance, not just to AI, but also to AI ethics. So what they expect to do concretely more about this. So here, I just want to give you an idea, of how all these considerations are implemented and instantiated inside a single company, like the one where I work at IBM, where we put together, of course, technical solutions, technical toolkits, and these are the ones that you see here on the right, like to make sure that the AI that is built and delivered to our clients has the right properties. So there are tools for many different properties of what we call trustworthy AI, that in our definition is AI that is fair, transparent, robust, explainable, and private. And for each one of these, we call them pillars of trustworthy AI, we built a technical tool like the AI Fact Sheet 360 is about transparency, the AI Explainability 360 is about explainability, and then we have one about fairness, robustness, and so on. So, but this picture is intended to show you that the technical tools are important, very important, but they're just one piece of this big puzzle where all these other boxes are needed. So again, like everybody else, we started from principles. Here you see on the top left, where we said that in our view, AI should augment human intelligence, not replace it, data commitments, as well as transparency for the technology. Then, as I said, we defined what we mean by the kind of AI that we want to build. We call trustworthy AI with those 5 pillars, 5 properties. And then we build the governance. And this is an internal centralized governance, which again, it brings the idea that governance needs a centralized place to be, even within a company. And this is not what happens in blockchains, is not what happens in semantic web. So this idea of resolving the AI ethics issues in a centralized way is still very present in the evolution of AI ethics. And it needs to change in order to be applied to decentralized environments. So here, instead, as I said, even within IBM, we have a centralized way of governing these AI ethics activities in the form of a board that represents all the business units and then makes decisions about the various initiatives internally and the processes internally that the company uses to build AI with the right properties, to deliver it with the right property, a risk assessment a framework to evaluate the risk of a certain offering to a client and possibly to mitigate the risk by changing the offering or even not delivering at all. Education modules for our developers to help them understand what these issues are and then to give them the right methodologies to address them in the form of what we call the ethics by design playbook, which is a way to add additional ethics by design processes within the AI life cycle so that these developers can understand how to build the technology with the right properties. As I mentioned, the team diversity, a lot of multi-stakeholder consultation, partnership with many other stakeholders to bring our expertise and lessons learned, and also to learn from others, and also expansion to other technologies, because more and more AI will be combined with other technologies, in particular with neurotech, for example, and quantum computing that raise additional ethics issues. So let me go a little bit faster in these details that I have about the internal processes of IBM. So this is about the partnership, and this is about the fact that we don't just look at AI, but more and more, let me go to the lessons learned here. So what we learned is that, first of all, there has been a great progress for this evolution that I showed you in the 3 phases: awareness, principles, and practice. But it is true that this, and this is done in the frame of mind of a centralized environment where AI is built and is delivered and is regulated. So again, first reflection is that there has been a lot of great progress in a relatively small short time. There are many actors that played their roles and are still playing their roles in these environments, and they play complementary roles. The AI researchers, the companies, the governments, the civil society organizations, standard bodies, universities, and so on. What has been learned is that definitely one needs to work out of the silos, breaking barriers among different disciplines in a very multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder, and also multicultural approach, which should be as proactive as possible. With AI, we were not that proactive at the beginning because we were mostly reactive to what things that we were seeing happening and we didn't like. So we wanted to put some solutions to that. But more and more, we learned to be more proactive towards addressing new ethics issues. We also learned lessons about what it means to operationalize AI ethics within a company. First, that is not enough to have an AI ethics team within a company. It needs a company-wide approach where all the business units play their role, a different role. It needs a governance body that so far, what I've seen in IBM, but also in other companies, is a centralized governance body that takes care of making sure that things are coordinated within the company and done in a synergic way. A lot of partnerships that are needed to really learn from each other, and the fact that technical tools are not enough. They're important, they are fundamental for building technology, but they're definitely not the only solution, and possibly the simplest way, the simplest piece of the overall puzzle in putting together the mechanisms and the processes and the education framework and so on to build and deliver AI with the right properties to address these AI ethics issues. Regulation is very important, of course, but needs to be anticipated, and policymakers also need to be informed about what's the best way to regulate AI. And in more decentralized environments, of course, regulation plays maybe a different role that still needs to be understood, in my view. And so these lessons that we learned in AI ethics in a centralized environment so far, I think that they're going to be useful for not starting from scratch in new environments and with new technologies, like, as I said, quantum computing, neurotech, and decentralized frameworks such as the semantic web, blockchain, and others. And definitely some of those lessons, I think they're going to be very useful, and they're going to accelerate the path to deal with the additional AI ethics concerns in these new environments. Let me finish by thanking everybody. If you want to know more about what IBM is doing around AI ethics and think about how to expand those frameworks to other environments that are closer to the semantic web, you can go to this website. The QR code leads you there, or read this paper that has been published by the World Economic Forum recently about how IBM is put together the whole AI ethics framework internally. Thank you. I'm happy to respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Wonderful talk. We've got the first question, the second question in the chat. I'll just read it out. Thank you, says Maria Keats. Could you elaborate on how AI ethics may or already does affect particular subtopics or techniques in the semantic web, such as ontology development or reasoning over linked open data?
So, I don't know whether I can really respond with details about this question. What I can say is that in AI, of course, there is also a lot of push towards automation. So to use machine readable and machine interpretable metadata, for example, to automate processes. And this is a push. I mean, I see it also within IBM, there is a push towards automation. People want to push a button and solve a problem and not being there involved and so on. And this, in some sense, is a good trend, but also it may lead to excessive automation in terms of not engaging with humans in the loop, especially when it has to do with interpreting meaning that has to do with some ethics and moral judgments. So in that sense, the push towards automation and the use of metadata is, in my view, has to be treated with care, because especially for high-stake decision environment that may impact on people's life, we still need to have, in my view, people engaged and involved and building oversight to the decisions. So I don't have a specific answer to those technical issues, but I think that we need to carefully consider when human engagement and oversight is still needed, even if we could have solutions for more and more automation.
If I can piggyback on this question and on your answer on this,
Yeah.
so given that you also mentioned earlier, our data is biased and our workforce is not very diverse and biased, and our metadata will be biased in the same way. Does IBM or do you have any ideas for solving this bias, and or even just understanding it?
No, the bias testing and mitigation, I mean, there are a lot of tools and processes to help people recognize their own biases. First of all, education around bias. Second, the diversity in the teams. Third, technical tools that address the bias. But of course, bias is not just one kind of bias. There are many different. Each definition of fairness has the corresponding notion of bias that needs to be avoided or needs to be mitigated. So definitely there are a lot of tools, technical, social, education, and so on, to address this bias issue, and then to be transparent about what bias is still there. So that whoever using that AI system can use it in an informed way, because maybe there is still some form of bias that is not relevant for the deployment scenario, so that's fine. So definitely there are a lot of complementary solutions and techniques to detect and mitigate bias of various forms. And yes, you're right that this bias can be present in the training data of an AI model, can be present in every other decisions that the developers make in building the AI model, not just in the data for training, and can be present also in the metadata. So in fact, for example, even in the training data, the bias can be in the data itself, because the distribution of the data does not represent well all the groups of people, but it can also be present in the labeling of the data made by humans, right? So that's part of, in some sense, the metadata. And so that there are tools and ways of generating synthetic data, for example, generating labels, or even not dealing with labeled data, but dealing with more unlabeled data, right? In an environment like the semantic web, where metadata is essential to understand the meaning of what is on the web, then definitely I'm not sure that the current solutions and techniques that we put in place for the mitigating bias in training data or in models are exactly the same, going to be successful in also dealing with the metadata. So definitely that's a good starting point, but as I said, more generally, I think that we need to expand our frame of mind where things are so decentralized. But in some sense, it is true that also the training data right now that we have in our models are labeled in a very decentralized way. They're not labeled but just by one person, but they're labeled by people all over, no? So I think that they are a good starting point, but there may be additional considerations of this very extreme decentralized model that need to be put in place additional techniques.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There's another question, basically also further going into this direction. Claudia D'Amato asks, among the different pillars characterizing AI ethics, what is the one having the highest urgency to be tackled in a distributed, open, incomplete, shared web environment?
Well, again, in my view, so let me start from a centralized environment. Centralized environment, I think the most important ones are the fairness and the transparency, in my view. In the decentralized, in a distributed environment, I think that they remain very important, especially the transparency, which may be even more available in a decentralized environment, but definitely the bias and the fairness issue and the transparency, I would say that they still remain very important.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the noise. Frank asks how to distinguish genuine ethics intention of company from ethics washing, like greenwashing. So typically how to believe Meta or Microsoft when they claim that privacy is at the heart of their concerns.
Okay, so as I said, clients ask more and more, tell me, show me what you're doing about bias, what you're doing about transparency, explainability, and so on. So a company may even say things that maybe are not exactly what they're doing to the media or in some web page and so on, but the clients wants to see what actually is done. And if the clients are not happy, there are clients, for example, at IBM, I've seen clients that have a very specific questionnaire. What are you doing about bias in this solution that you are building for us? So, and you have to respond with data, with tests, with so clients are not satisfied with some statement saying I'm I'm doing the best in all these AI ethics issues. They want to see and they want to have proofs. So if they're not happy with it, they go somewhere else, because a bank or a government doesn't want to get solution that then puts them into trouble with their own clients, because maybe they generate discrimination or other things, because also IBM, for example, delivers a lot of solutions to environment that are very heavily regulated, like the financial domain or others. So they want to make sure that when an audit comes to them, not to IBM, then they can respond in the best way with informed. They are informed about what solutions they are using. So in my view, it's so the client trust is what tells you, whether a company is doing just saying things or actually doing them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we only have 10-minute breaks between sessions. So
okay.
we need to end the. Thank you very, very much. This was most helpful. There are plenty more questions in the chat. I'm going to transliterate them to the Slack channel, and we'll try to get them further back to you. Thank you very much. I think this was
thank you.
Going on at IBM. Sorry for mislabeling you. You are at IBM.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, next session will continue in 10 minutes. I'll just put the link to the next session in the chat if it's easier for you. Otherwise, we'll see you next session. So I'll close this webinar in 1 or 2 minutes.